All right. We'd like to welcome you to this interview with Blake O'Rulian. We are the Fan to Fan uh, Combat Podcast. And Blake, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on and joining us. We really love what you've been doing for Fierce Fighting. And so I guess we just want to start off a little bit, getting to know you, your background, where you're from.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. You guys do a great job. Yeah, so I grew up in California and grew up being a sports broadcasting nut. Love sports my entire life. Found MMA a little bit later on in life, but overall it was a love for sports and camaraderie. And I knew I probably wasn't going to make it to the NBA someday. I knew I probably wasn't going to make it to the NFL, but I thought to myself, man, doing something in terms of broadcasting in the broadcasting world would be really, really cool. And ever since then, just kind of become a student of the game. And so I'm nowhere near where I want to get in terms of skill, talent level, all that stuff. Very, very far away from that. But in terms of opportunities and stuff, Fierce Fighting Championship has given me an incredible opportunity. And so I'm really grateful for that. But been kind of just doing it my whole life. Started around not my whole life, but started around 15, 16 years old, started learning how to edit, started learning how to, put stuff together, create content, do stuff in front of the camera, do stuff behind the camera. And it's all kind of culminated into this career, I guess you could say. And I'm super grateful for it.
Absolutely. And you are a commentator, and I'm sure so much more for Fierce Fighting Championship. How did you end up with Fierce? Tell us a little bit how you got into that.
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy story. So I all throughout college I wanted to call fights. Like my dream is to do exactly what I do for Fierce right now. Like be a play-by-play announcer for a fight promotion is like an incredible opportunity. So I reached out to Fierce years ago. I mean, I think it was 2019, 2020. And I basically just said like, "Hey, this is my resume. These are some things that I've done. I love MMA. I would love to call fights for you." And I reached out to them. I reached out to another promotion called Mountain Force, and then I reached out to Steel Fist as well. So some of the bigger promotions in the state of Utah. Reached out to all of them. You know, most of them were like, "Oh, we kind of already have our person, and we already have this that." We appreciate it. We'll keep you, in the loop if we ever need someone, which is typically the answer you get. Um, Luckily, Mountain Force back in the day, they do a lot of their shows in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming now. But Mountain Force said, "Yeah, we'll give you a shot." And so I went and called fights for them for about a year and a half, called probably 10 to a dozen different cards for them. Loved every second of it. And I really appreciate them and love those people. But a lot of their shows started going out of state. A lot of them started going to Montana. So I stopped calling for them. And right around that time, 2, 3 years into reaching out to Fierce and all these different promotions, Zach Partridge, who's the COO and matchmaker of Fierce, said, "Hey, you called fights for Fierce, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." And he's like, "Well, we'll give you a shot in 2 weeks, be ready." And it was kind of like a tryout almost. It was kind of like, what we'll see how you do. And if we like you, then we'll keep you around. If we don't like you, then like, thanks so much. And, good luck on your journey. But luckily was able to stick around with them and incredibly grateful for that opportunity. And now it's coming up on a year now, which is really cool.
That's awesome. So you kind of touched on it earlier. You said you got started as a MMA fan later in life. Can you touch on that? What got you into MMA and where did that love of MMA start?
I'm completely a product of Conor McGregor, as most of us are, and he's not necessarily my favorite fighter anymore. I've got now that I'm more well versed in the MMA world. There's so many more that I'm a bigger fan of, but Conor's great and has had his time and marked history in terms of MMA, and we're not the sport that we are without him in it. But I definitely he caught my eye. I loved the way that he presented the trash talk, brought it all in, was funny, was charismatic. People enjoyed watching him, so I started watching along with him. And I think I was just one of the few stragglers that kept watching when a lot of people stopped watching. And then obviously MMA since that time has even popularized even more, and so more fans are coming to the sport, which I think is absolutely incredible. But it all kind of started with Conor, and since then I have just been the biggest fan. I mean, I try to watch as much UFC as I possibly can. I try to watch the other promotions. Obviously, my full-time job is Fierce Fighting Championship, so I'm constantly, studying and doing everything I can to make sure I'm well versed there. But I can't get enough of this sport, man. And that's coming from someone who can't get enough of pretty much any sport. At the top of that list is 100% MMA.
Yeah. I think we're very much in the same group with you. Kellen and I are both people who started watching later than most people. I think so we were even later than you. COVID is when we really got into it. And I don't think we've missed any events since COVID. It's just been like a diehard addiction at this point to MMA. But you said you started off being a Conor fan and then graduated to other fighters. Who are some of your favorite fighters now that you like watching?
So people will kill me for this one, but I don't really care because he's incredible. And I think he has the most impressive resume amongst the most impressive resumes. Henry Cejudo is actually my favorite fighter, which is kind of a crazy thing to say because I don't like the cringe stuff either. I don't like all of that, but my goodness, you beat Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Dominic Cruz, Marlon Moraes in his prime. Like, how can you not say that guy's one of the greatest of all time? If he beats Aljamain Sterling, you've got to think to yourself, this guy's in the GOAT conversation, which is crazy that he's not already in it. So Henry Cejudo 100% is my favorite fighter. I'm kind of embarrassed that he's my favorite, but my goodness, you look at the resume. I would say outside of Henry Cejudo, it's got to be Max Holloway. I love Max Holloway. I just think he's so fun. That fight against Calvin Kattar is the single greatest MMA performance I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never seen anything like it since, and I don't know if we'll ever see anything like it past. So I would say definitely top two are them. I really like Anthony Smith. Trying to think of a few others that I really like. I like Ian Gary right now. I mean, I don't really have like fighters that I don't like. I mean, I really like everybody. But at the top of that list is always going to be Max Holloway and Henry Cejudo for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, me and Brady are kind of the same way. We talk about it all the time, how we feel like our favorite fighter is constantly changing. When I first got into UFC, one of the first fights I watched was when Cody Garbrandt flatlined Asuncion, right? And so that made me a huge Cody Garbrandt. And I went back and I watched his fight with Dominic Cruz. And, since that time, a lot of things have happened, it's kind of changed. But I think that's one thing that's unique about MMA and UFC is you don't really have to key in on one specific fighter that's your favorite. And you don't really have to be super disappointed if that fighter loses. I think that's one of the unique elements of MMA.
No, it's incredible. I mean, you really do kind of just go along for the ride. And I think that's what makes MMA so special is that it's not like, oh, I'm only going to watch my team. It's like, well, your team isn't necessarily a thing. It's just kind of you're a fan of the promotion, and the promotion does a great job at building up the fighters. And so you kind of become a fan of a whole slew of them. And so when it's a stacked pay-per-view card, it's like, I'm not just excited for one fighter on this card. I'm not just excited to watch one player on this baseball team or this football team. I'm excited to watch every single one of them that makes the walk. And I just hope everyone does as well as they possibly can. I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of this sport is that I think there are obviously people have their favorites, but there's definitely also that aspect of like, there's not like one person that everyone hates and there's always going to be a little bit of a mixture of everyone in there. And it's incredible. It really makes for an incredible sport. And I think it's so cool that you guys caught on back during the pandemic and now you guys are doing what you're doing now, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think MMA, and because Dana kind of went right through the pandemic, I think it gained a lot of steam. It picked up us along the way and many others. So I think that was a big growing point for MMA in general. But so you are kind of at a unique spot. You are a commentator. The other people we've talked to have been more on the fighting side, and I've asked them who they look up to and kind of try to mirror as fighters. Do you ever look at like John Anik or Joe Rogan, Michael Bisping, all those, Daniel Cormier, and say that dude does that awesome, and I'd like to kind of do a little bit of that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And truly, like, I'm a firm believer that like you should watch what you're trying to do. And like when I played basketball, I watched tons of basketball to make sure that I looked and played just like Steve Nash and Dwayne Wade and Kobe. And so when it comes to broadcasting, it's no different. I have to try to mirror and find the things that I like, turn them into my own. But my goodness, I mean, I watch and study Anik like a hawk. It's like what does he do and how do I do it that works for me? And so I'll actually tell you a quick little story. Like when I was doing Mountain Force, Anik does large, actually I got one right here for you. Anik does like large, like index cards. So it's like double this size, but that's where he does his cards or his boards for his research. And every play-by-play announcer, you know, the number one thing is make sure that you're prepared and have all your research ready. Well, I can't read my own handwriting. It's that bad. And so I have to find and so I would find myself trying to read off of my own note cards. I'm like, what am I trying to say here on this research? Like, I can't remember. And so what I found was that I needed to find a new way to do it. Well, Brendan Fitzgerald, who does a lot of the fight nights, he prints his out and he color codes them and he puts them into these quadrants. So I DM'd Brendan Fitzgerald of the UFC and I said, hey, how can you send me over like a template? Can you send me over how you guys do or how you do it? And he sent it over to me and I started using that template right around the time that I started doing calling fights for Fierce. And that's been a huge thing. And so when he was actually in Salt Lake, I got the chance to introduce myself and say, hey, you know, like you sent me that. And he was the nicest guy ever. And I just told him like, your template is, you know, a huge part of what I do now. And so I really am appreciative. But to answer your question, like Kevin Harlan, John Anik, Mike Breen, Ryan Ruocco, like every great play-by-play announcer that I personally am a fan of, I am trying just as hard to study them as I am just enjoying watching them. And that goes beyond that. Like Megan O'Leary's incredible. There's so many great broadcasters out there that the UFC has. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I study them like a hawk, man. It's kind of creepy, like how much I'm like trying to make sure that I'm emulating how they do it. And I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I'm trying to get there.
But that's the amazing things. It sounds like you've been putting in the time and the preparation, right? Because you want to reach your potential. I mean, I think that's one thing we take for granted as fans is the effort that goes into putting together these productions and the behind the scenes preparation that has to take place in order for a broadcast or a pay-per-view to be able to be effective and to be able to be enjoyed by the viewers, right?
No, yeah. I mean, I will be honest. Like, I have this joke with one of my mentors, Jordan Buscarani. He's actually the director of our show for Fierce, and I love Jordan so much. And we have this kind of ongoing joke. He also does a lot of play-by-play, and he's 10 times better than I am. He's incredible, and he always says, you know, oh, you just show up and start talking, right? Like you don't do any research. Like sarcastically. It takes a lot of work, man. Like it really does. Like it's so much harder. And John Anik always says it this way: for a span of 8 hours, Fierce shows are typically 5 to 6 hours. We are judged on every utterance that we make for that time. And so it's very stressful. You want to make sure you get the stats right. You got to make sure every name is pronounced correctly. You got to make sure every single statistic that you're saying makes sense, but is also engaging enough. There's so much to it. And so it causes for a lot of preparation and a lot of time. Joel Haro is a good friend of mine, training partner, as well as broadcast partner as well. For his last fight, his board, like his sheet that I do for every single fighter, his took good 2 hours. I mean, like that's how long it takes for just one fighter to make sure that their statistics are in order, that it flows correctly, and like that it's ready to go for fight day. And so to answer your question, or to just kind of add on what you were saying, it takes a lot to make sure that the production is right. And that's kind of the goal, is just make it as good as it possibly can. We want Fierce to look just as good as anything else that you see on TV, because we want to build the fans that all these other promotions have as well.
Yes, absolutely. And when you're going up to a fight, when you're getting ready to start a big fight night, what are those emotions like? Because I'm guessing you're pretty excited to watch the fights. I would imagine, at least I'd be a little bit nervous going in there, you know, knowing that everyone's going to be listening to every word you say. But I guess that's where that preparation that you talked about comes in to make you feel better. But what's the overall emotion as a fight night is about to kick off?
Oh man, so it's really funny. My mom came to a show a couple months ago, and I told her before. I said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I may look stressed, pissed off, not happy, you know, all of the above. I might look like that, but I want you to know I'm having the time of my life. There is nothing else I would rather do. Broadcasting is absolute chaos and nothing ever goes right and nothing will ever be perfect and it never can be perfect because that's what broadcasting is. It's on the fly and you prepare as much as you possibly can. So to answer, I would say that it is absolutely stressful, but it is so exciting at the same time. I mean, there like I will be jumping up and down. I will be shadow boxing with Joel and Jason. Like I will be doing all sorts of stuff just to get my jitters out before we get going because I am so amped for the fights. Like the fights, obviously that is the product. That is what we are presenting to everyone who is willing to watch. And we have so many incredible fighters, so many great matchups that I really am so excited for what's to come. So right before the fights, you can't really stop me from just jumping up and down and going absolutely crazy. But at the same time, I'm really stressed, but in a good way. It's really hard to explain, but it's unlike any other feeling in the entire world. There's no doubt about that.
That's awesome. So we've been able to touch on it a little bit in terms of the Fierce Fighting promotion. You've been a part of it for a year now. For anybody who hasn't watched the Fierce Fighting promotion, or hasn't had a chance to be super acquainted with it, how would you sell the Fierce Fighting promotion? What is unique about it, and where do you see it headed as a promotion?
I think that we as a promotion, we are so dedicated to making sure that one, it looks right, but two, that it makes sense. We want our matchups to be ones that people see. And once they're fans of these people, they go, oh my gosh, I can't miss that fight. We want that for every single matchup. We want everyone to know if Yazin's fighting in the main event, they're fighting this person. And that's interesting because of this. We want to be able to tell that story and to show everyone that there is so much more. It's so much more than just a fight. There's storylines involved, there's interesting matchups involved, and there's a lot on the line. Some of these fighters, when we get to those main and co-main events, like a win in a Fierce Fighting Championship cage in a main event, co-main event with a belt on the line, like that could lead you to the UFC. That could lead you to a Bellator or PFL. And so we want people to realize the magnitude of these fights is that these could be life-changing performances. I mean, like you had with Yazin on the other day, Yazin basically said, like, I need to win this fight if I want to make it somewhere. Like, I need to be able to beat a guy as good and as talented and as qualified as Joel Haro if I can make it to that level. And Yazin did a fantastic job and took control of the fight where he needed to, and got the win. And now he's kind of back on track, and we see that all the time. So we want as Fierce to be able to create a community, but also to be able to create fandom, create a little bit of drama. We want to just fill our fans with interesting content and things to look forward to, I guess you should say. We don't want to just be, there's a Seinfeld quote that I really like Seinfeld. My mom and I really enjoy Seinfeld. And she said, and it's that they're trying to make a TV show, and one of the characters says they're going to watch it because it's on TV. With Fierce, we don't want people to watch just because there's fights on. We want people to watch because it's like, I can't miss Kent Mafaleo. I can't miss Joel Haro. I can't miss Viliami Kulu. Like, we want people to be excited for who's to come and why people are excited. So when we're posting the highlights, when we're posting everything like that, we want people to know, oh my gosh, I got to make sure that I tune in because they're absolutely nuts. They are so talented in that cage when the lights turn on. So that's kind of the goal.
Yes, and there's an abundance of talent at Fierce Fighting. Just looking from the outside, you can definitely see that it's there. And speaking of looking forward to the future, what's coming up for Fierce Fighting? I believe there's an event in April at the Maverick Center. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, April 21st. April 21st, we've got most likely 4 titles on the line. We've got 3 amateur titles as well as a light heavyweight professional title. We've got some heavy hitters coming back. I mean, Viliami Kulu is one of them. Andrew Mickelson is one of them who I don't know how long you guys have been watching Fierce Fighting Championship, but Andrew Mickelson, June of last year, had an incredible knockout that actually got the likes of Pat McAfee's attention. I mean, it really blew up. I mean, it was crazy. So Andrew Mickelson is fighting for a title. Hannah Silva, who is our first female champion, who is incredible. She's defending her title, or she will be trying to defend her title, I should say. And then we've also got the light heavyweight professional title with Jerome Hatch, as well as Eric Wallin, who that is a rematch as well from back in 2014. So that's super interesting. So there are a lot of fights to look forward to in April. And what's more exciting about that is that 3 of those 4 titles that we just talked about are vacant titles. So right now we have 4 champions. By the end of that April show, we could have, let me do the math really quick. We could have 7 champs under Fierce Fighting Championship banner. And so that's kind of the goal, is to get belts in rotation, get people talking about Fierce, get people defending their belts for Fierce, and creating the best possible night of fights that we possibly can. But there's a lot of fights to look forward to. There's a lot of fighters to look forward to, and a lot on the come up too that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. And I think this is awesome because it's evidence of growth within the promotion, but it's also evidence of growth within the region, right? Because it feels like maybe Utah, the Rocky Mountain region might not be viewed as a hub for mixed martial arts, but we know that there's so many high level people that want to train here and they want to compete here. So in terms of the growth in the region, how is Fierce Fighting contributing to that?
You know, it's really interesting because we have an incredible community of people who fight here in Utah, but then we're also bringing in, I mean, Babajit Chaudhary, he came over from India, and Jag Buller in Idaho, he came over from Canada. And we have fighters that come from Florida, from California, from Washington. I mean, we have people from all over trying to come and fight for Fierce Fighting Championship. And we're very, very grateful for everyone that comes and tries to, and wants to compete with, Utah-based fighters, and Utah really is growing. I mean, there's a lot of solid names that are coming up and growing and building throughout the promotion. And so our goal is to just continue to build up every fighter, whether you come from out of state, out of country. Like if you become our champion, like we're going to take care of you. Like we're going to make sure that you're taken care of. And we're also going to make sure that we give you the best possible fights. And so that's kind of the beauty of it, is that it's not necessarily, which there's nothing wrong with this, but I'm really grateful that we're not just Utah versus Utah fighter. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a Utah fighter versus someone from out of state raises a lot of eyebrows, and it also grows the region in terms of schools. I mean, there's so many schools now. Like there's like any big city you go to, there's somewhere that you can train and represent. I've called fighters from St. George up north in Logan. I mean, like there's fighters all over the state. And that's because of all the gyms. And I think Fierce is definitely doing a good job of putting a light on that by having all these different fighters on the cards.
For sure. And Fierce is definitely that sort of stepping stone, for fighters to, kind of jumpstart their career and try to make it to the next level. And kind of shifting gears a little bit, we wanted to talk to you about a little bit of UFC. First, I wanted to ask you how UFC 285 was. I saw on your Instagram that you were there.
John 285.
Jon Jones.
Oh my goodness, man. That was so fun. That was so cool. So yeah, it was the day after my birthday, and my amazing wife, I woke up and she was like, "Hey, we got to go." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like super tired. I'm like delirious. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what's going on." And she was like, "You got to go. We're going to Vegas. We're going to the fights tonight." And I was like, "What?" And I like jumped out of bed and was super excited. It was so cool. So we got there, and it took us a while to find parking and everything, but we got there right when Ian Gary made the walk. And that was super cool. So we saw Ian Gary up through the entire night, and it was such a stacked card. So many great fights, a lot of like weird finishes, like a lot of like odd, like submission finishes. Like when DC was like, "What did he tap him with?" There was a lot of that, like in the crowd, people were like, "Wait, how did that happen?" Like I didn't see where the choke was and stuff like that. But it was unbelievable, man. Like it was so much fun. And there's I posted it on my Instagram, but my favorite part of a UFC live event is right before the main card hits. They play this montage video, and it is the
Baba
I told my
O'Reilly, right?
yes, yes, and
Yeah.
I told my wife before it started because this was my wife's first time ever at a UFC event, and I was like, it is the best edited montage I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, I get goosebumps just looking at it. Like it's so cool. So yeah, man, that 285 was incredible. So cool to see Jon Jones live, to see the buzz that he got when he made that walk was crazy. But to see him win in such an emphatic way, it was incredible. So it was really cool, man.
Another UFC. This is more of a fan question, but is Jon Jones the GOAT?
Yeah, I'll say so. I mean, like the guy has literally the most title defenses, the most title wins, youngest ever, still doing it, the oldest champion. Like the guy is just a winner, and the guy just keeps winning. And I really, so I actually, I had this like cool take. Like I thought that I thought that I had figured it all out. I was watching Embedded, and Bo Nickel came into the room, and that was really cool to see too live. Was seeing Bo Nickel come in the pop that he had. I loved watching him fight live. But Bo Nickel comes into the room on Embedded, and Jon Jones and him start doing a little like play wrestling and stuff like that. And he was leaving, and I saw that Jon Jones like was kind of breathing a little heavy, and I was like, oh, like maybe the cardio won't be there. And I was like, oh, I was so wrong. Like my goodness, he looked so good out there that Saturday night. And so it was really cool to see that. It was super fun. But yeah, I think seeing it live, seeing him, I do have to say, I think Jon Jones is probably the GOAT.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you there. But going on kind of more just fan UFC stuff, UFC 287, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Perez coming up in April. What do you see happening in that rematch? Just a
This
prediction.
isn't like this isn't like the craziest take in the whole world. I know I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but like it's really tough to say where it's really tough to see what happens with a fight like that when we've seen it a couple times. And yes, Izzy has been winning those fights, and so that's going to be the same narrative coming into this one. It's tough to say. Like does Israel Adesanya like look the same, but is able to survive the punching power? I mean, he was winning that fight on the cards. He was winning that fight in terms of everyone. But Alex, I've said this to so many of my friends, but he has the greatest X factor in the history of the sport. I don't know if we've ever seen someone who can literally throw a punch with such little time left and land it clean and be able to get someone out of there like an Israel Adesanya. Like there's not a lot of people like that. And so it's going to be tough to see what happens. I'm very interested to see what happens. I personally, I just can't wait for it. Like I'm such a fan of both of them. I think it's super exciting to see what could happen. But yeah, that's what I'll say about it. It's going to be a great fight.
Awesome. Another fan question. What's your favorite division to watch right now in the UFC?
Oh, that's so good. That's such a great question. I think I think women's flyweight is super interesting now with Alexa Grasso, now the champ. You've got Tatiana Suarez who's coming for it. You've got obviously Valentina Shevchenko, and then I'm Aaron Blanchfield. That's what I'm thinking of. You got Aaron Blanchfield. So like there's a bunch of hungry competitors eyeing Alexa Grasso right now, and I think any one of those names just mentioned could definitely become champion within the next 12 months. And so we're just gonna have to wait and see. But I think that's one of the most interesting ones. I definitely think the bantamweight right now is very interesting. And like I said earlier, like Henry is my favorite fighter. But on top of that, like what does Merab Dvalishvili do after what just happened with Piotr Jan? What happens with Corey Sandhagen now that he just beat I can't even remember who he Marlon Vera. Like there's so many questions. Where does Sean O'Malley fit into all of this? On top of that, you've got Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo who are going to be fighting for the belt. Like between all of those names, like there's no question that there's going to be some interesting storylines and some interesting things to find out. And to kind of bring it back, like that's what I love about Fierce too, is we always come in with a ton of questions and we end the night with a whole bunch of answers. And so we tried to do that with Fierce, but that's one of the beautiful things about MMA is that it's like there's so many questions to be had, and by the end of the night, hopefully all of them are definitively answered. You don't always get a definitive answer, but then that sets up for the future for what's to come. So I would say probably women's flyweight and men's bantamweight are my two favorite divisions right now.
Who do you think wins that Cejudo versus Aljo fight? If you had to predict. you think Cejudo's going to have any ring rust, or do you think he's going to go back in there as dominant as he was when he left?
It's so tough to say. It's so tough to say because you've got a guy like Henry Cejudo who's just done so many things right. You know, like, I mean, the resume that he has is impeccable. I mean, between the two UFC belts, defending both of them, as well as the Olympic gold medal, like, there's a lot to say. But at the same time, when you look at someone like Henry Cejudo, like, why did he retire in the first place? Was it because he was worried that he didn't have it anymore? I mean, he won that belt against Dominic Cruz, and Dominic Cruz, although in my opinion the greatest bantamweight of all time, has not looked the same over the last couple of years as he did, obviously, in his prime. Obviously, past his prime was when Henry Cejudo fought him. And so you've got to question, where is Henry Cejudo's skill level at today in 2023, away from the sport? He's been in the sport coaching, but obviously that's a lot different. Aljamain Sterling is pretty much a seamless fighter. Like, there's really not a lot of holes in that game. And so when you look at that, when you look at his ability to control the back, I think it's going to be a really, really tough fight for Henry. I'll be rooting for Henry, just to put it out there, but we will see what it looks like. I picked Dominic Cruz when Henry fought Dominic Cruz. I thought the length was going to be too much back in 2020. I think the back control of Aljamain Sterling is going to be something difficult if he can get a hold of Henry. And so I think I'm going to go with Aljamain, but I will be rooting for Henry Cejudo. So if Henry wins, I will be a very, very happy person.
That's awesome. So I have another question for you. This is more of a professional question, but you actually had an opportunity to be a part of the press in terms of at UFC 268.
Yeah, 278, but
278.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no,
in
you're
Salt
good,
Lake
you're
City, Usman Edwards 2, and you had an opportunity to interview Dana White, I believe,
Yeah.
and to speak with some of the fighters. Can you talk about that experience and how you feel that was, a big part of what you've done in your profession and your career?
You know, I'll say this right off the bat. That is seriously, definitely one of the greatest moments of my professional career. And I will say this, and this is not because of any bias or anything. Like, to me, the more important and opportunity I'm more grateful for is what I do for Fierce right now, which is crazy to think. But I was incredibly grateful to interview and talk to Dana White and talk to all these different fighters. Being able to rub shoulders with some of the names, the John Morgans, the Oscar Willises, Jose. I mean, be in the same room as guys like Kamaru Usman, as well as Leon Edwards, Jose Aldo. I mean, it was really, really cool, man. To be able to ask questions to those people and to really get inside of their minds and things like that. Be in the same room as when, Luke Rockhold kind of got on the Full Send MMA guy, Sean, who I actually met Sean in real life. Sean's a really, really nice guy. I will say that. But when that happened and that blew up, I was like, I was sitting right next to Sean when that was happening. We were assigned right next to each other. Park City TV, Full Send MMA. We were right next to each other. It was crazy. So yeah, I mean, it was a dream come true to be able to cover that event and to be able to be there, to be, less than 100 feet away from when Kamaru Usman got knocked out, when it seemed like he was going to run away with another title defense, when it seemed like he was unbeatable. I mean, that was truly the loudest arena I've ever heard. That is the loudest noise I've ever heard, was just the eruption from the Salt Lake City crowd. It was incredible. Being able to interview Dana White was definitely probably the most scared I've ever been in my entire life. Like, you guys talked about, like, oh, do you get nervous before like Fierce shows? It's like, yeah, I get a little nervous. I'm more excited than anything. But I found out in a matter of like 2 minutes between the time that I knew that I was going to be interviewing Dana White and when I actually interviewed Dana White, because Oscar Willis of the Mac Life, I told him, like, hey, Oscar, like, it's cool. It's nice to meet you. Like, I'm a big fan of you. And he comes up to me and goes, hey, Dana's doing a presser right now, and so you might want to go over there. And then it was like, oh, we're doing individual interviews. So I do a one-on-one interview with Dana, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I was freaking out. Honestly, it was a really rough interview. Like, it's not my best, not even close. But it was a dream come true to be able to talk to him and be able to, have a conversation, pick his brain, and talk UFC with a guy who made it what it is. So that was really cool. And the entire fight week was just a week-long dream come true. So hope to have many, many more opportunities to do so.
Absolutely. Love it. Well, Blake, we don't have much time left with you, but we really appreciate you coming. I guess, Kellen, is there anything you wanted to ask before I set this down?
No, just yeah, where can people find you on social media?
Big thing is just head over to Fierce Fighting Championship. Give them a follow. It's all about them. We want to build that fight promotion as much as we possibly can. And I appreciate you guys having me on to be able to do that. Don't worry about me. I'm not that exciting. I just post about my life and, you know, regular boring stuff. But what's more important is Fierce Fighting Championship. So give them a follow, check out their content. And, you know, we're constantly trying to post and build community over there. So
Perfect.
Absolutely. Big things coming for sure. For Fierce.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Blake. And we look forward to watching you continue in your career as well as watching Fierce Fighting continue to grow as a promotion.
Hey, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for the time. That was, you guys do a great job. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
All right.
it.